Okay, so in the last video, basically, we tied up the treadles. We're ready to start weaving, and before we start weaving, we're gonna start with the contrast thread. But we want to make sure that we've threaded everything correctly. So what we're gonna do basically is I've got the 4 middle treadles, if you recall, okay, and basically I want to make sure that they've been threaded correctly. So usually you need 2 people to do this, unless you've got some sort of camera to actually be able to show you what you're seeing. But when I lift up the first, when I press the first treadle, everything going across, there should be all empty space. Now you will notice that there is one right here. That's my floating selvage. It's meant to float, so because as I weave, I'm going to be going over and under it. Okay. Same thing on this side. I've got another floating selvage, but I can see all the way across that there is nothing in the middle of any of this. So this one is threaded correctly. I'm going to do the same one with all the other ones. So this is the second one. I'm not seeing anything there. Third one. Everything looks to be good. And the fourth one, everything looks to be good as well. Okay? So I'm good to go. Now, if you were, for whatever reason, to find, let's say, a thread, for example, going down the middle, there's some sort of threading error involved, right? So you got to figure out what that thread is. Is it because it's not going in the correct order? It's crisscrossed with another thread? There's something not right about it that you do need to correct before you start. Okay? Alrighty, so for this video, I'm going to be seated. I don't usually do the seated, obviously. I do it standing. And of course, I don't usually have this in the middle of my basement either. So basically, you want to have some sort of shuttle. You may have a stick shuttle that you use. I tend to prefer boat shuttles myself. In a boat shuttle, basically, you've got a metal pin right here, okay? The bobbin will go on it, okay? So in order for us to continue on, remember I talked about the fact that we're going to do a few rows of a contrast thread just to straighten out all the threads before we actually start weaving, okay? So I've already done that with one bobbin. I want to show you how I actually ended up doing that, okay? So we'll keep that there. It's probably going to fall off, okay? So actually maybe we'll put both of these down, okay? So I'm going to take the first one here, all right? And basically, you want to be able to tie it on, but when we actually throw the shuttle through the actual shed that we looked at earlier to make sure that all the threading was correct, you want to make sure that you don't knot it so that when the actual shuttle ends up going through at the very end, when this unwinds, the thread unwinds with it and is left behind. You don't want that shuttle to get stuck somewhere in that shed, okay? So in order to be able to do that, all right, we are going to, all right, I'm just going to do a single knot. That's it. I'm not doing a double knot. It should be able to pull right off, okay? So let's do that. I start with going from underneath, just one little knot there. And then when you start basically winding, so this basically is a manual bobbin winder. It's by Leclerc, which is the same as my loom, but there must be different companies out there, I'm pretty sure. There are electric bobbin winders as well. They go obviously a whole lot faster than the basic ones. Now I do have 3 cats, so let's hope that they don't walk in as I do this, because they will love the ball of yarn rolling around on the ground. So as I'm going through, okay, you want to kind of just maintain an even tension, and you're just kind of going to go across, back and forth. I'm going to fill it up as much as I possibly can. Now keep in mind with the boat shuttle, it can be full enough as long as it can rotate freely within that the boat space, okay? So let's start doing it here. All right, just going to go across. Obviously, when you get more and more used to it, you can go a lot faster. Okay, these ends eventually eventually that will stop. Okay, there we go. And you don't want to do it so wide, okay, at the ends that it's going to slip off, because that's going to be a bit of a nightmare when that starts to get tangled up as you go along. Okay, so I do mine a little bit fatter in the middle than I do on the sides, okay? So let's take this off. I'm going to cut that off. Oh, just going to put that over right there. I'm going to, there we go, check here, okay? Now if you look at the boat shuttle, okay, on this side there is a gap where the thread's actually going to come out of, okay? So when I put it on, all right, I take the boat shuttle off. The way I usually put it on, I don't know why, but when I actually put it on there, I want it so that the thread is coming underneath, and it's going to come out underneath through this hole right here, okay? So basically I don't know how I'm going to do this here backwards, but okay. So I'm putting it on. I'm just going to put it through that gap underneath here. Okay, so let's just figure that out here. All right, oops, sorry. you're seeing it. Not that it matters at this point. Okay. So I've been able to pull it right through, okay, and then I just put it down. And I want to make sure that it does move freely, because if it's so wide that it's, you know, stuck out, or it's there's a friction, it's not going to travel through your shed very nicely, okay, until, you know, some of that is actually wound down a little bit, okay. So basically, again, let's do another one. All right. And again, you can do several bobbins at a time. You don't have to, okay. I tend to do that so that I don't have to get up, especially when it's thicker yarn. You're getting up like every 5 minutes to do that. So I might do 3 or 4, use those up, then get up and do another 3 or 4. If you happen to have thinner thread and one bobbin lasts you, 15 minutes or 20 minutes of weaving, it is good ergonomically to be able to get up and move around a little bit so you don't get stuck in one place, okay? And you don't start to have a sore back, sore legs, etc., etc., okay? So again, same thing. See what happened there? Okay, not the end of the world, just back her up. Okay, all right. And again, a little bit fatter in the middle. All right. All right, that's good for now. Just gonna cut that off. I'll leave that there and clean that up afterwards. And that's basically the winding of the bobbin there before we get started back onto the loom. All right. Okay, so basically we're going to be starting to just weave in a contrast color, just a few lines right here, just to straighten, excuse me, to straighten these out, because right now they're kind of all pointed in, and we want to make sure that all the threads are straight before we actually start weaving, okay? I've just chosen just blue because I just happen to have it around. When you start, typically you're usually starting with plain weave. I didn't actually hook up any treadles to give me plain weave. I just literally hooked up the 4 that were required for this project, okay? So it really doesn't matter what the pattern is, it's just enough, again, to make sure that things are straight. So the hem, when I do get started on it, will be 1, 2, 3, 4 for the treadles. I'm just gonna do that. Unless it straightens out before that, even better, okay? So basically when you start, you're gonna press, and you wanna make sure that when you are weaving, people get very sore weaving sometimes, and you wanna figure out why you have that particular soreness. You should be able to weave for a decent amount of time before you get sore. You may have noticed in other videos, I'm actually not using your typical wooden bench. I'm using, right now I'm using actually a drum seat. Basically that my husband had, and he upgraded, and he's like, hey, would you prefer using this? I have broken more than one loom bench, not because of weight, but when I weave, I tend to wiggle for whatever reason, and then as I'm turning to get off of the loom, because I've got fairly short legs, I've got to be fairly close to the front bar here, and so because of that, constantly having to move, if I have anything with wheels, that becomes a pain, obviously, as you're pressing, because I have used actually desk chairs. The desk chairs were comfortable, obviously, on my tush, but the legs basically would end up hitting very close to the treadles, and I couldn't get in as close as I wanted to. So I've tried the wooden benches, as I said. I tried a piano bench. I was comfortable, but again, because of the wooden legs and they don't give a lot, after some time, a few months of weaving, one of the legs would literally give way and I'd fall, and hopefully, thankfully, I hadn't hurt myself on both of those benches. The next bench I tried to use was actually a metal bench. It was one of those ones that you use. It's a medical bench that's adjustable. You can put it, sit with it in the shower, for example. It's kind of, curved. I put a cushion on it because obviously hard bench doesn't work really well for my back. And that worked because I was able to adjust it to the correct height. This one basically comes with its own padding. It is adjustable, so I'm just trying it out to see whether or not it actually is comfortable for me to sit in. And what you want basically is that, without squeaking of course, is that when you sit, you want to be able to have your arms at 90 degrees, okay? And you want to basically, even if you videotape yourself as you are doing the weaving, that's also important sometimes too, because if you tend to do this all the time, where your back is arched, well, you may get pain in your lower back, for example, right? So I have a physiotherapist. Sometimes I'll ask him, okay, this is the problem I'm having. Give him some pictures, and he'll be able to tell me, okay, this is what you want to do. Try and fix it so that you're positioned this way. Same thing with my legs. I don't think you can see my legs at this point, but when you're actually doing your treadling, again, you want your knees to be like at 90 degrees as much as possible. You don't want them hiked up. You don't want them, you want it to be comfortable pressure as you're actually pushing down on the treadles. I tend to do treadling with, I might do them barefoot, but I also typically use socks. I don't typically use shoes. I only have 6 treadles, so it's not too bad, but I have heard, and I thought this is an excellent idea, because a lot of times I'll look down to see which treadle my foot is going on to make sure it's the correct treadle, because again, I've got 6 usually I'm working with, and somebody had told me that they actually put dots on the actual treadles to indicate the number, and so they can feel it with their toes and know, oh, okay, this one is 2, this one is 5, and so forth. I thought that was an excellent idea, but I have not actually tried that myself. Okay? Alright, so when we start here, I'm just going to hit treadle 1, I'm just going to do 1, 2, 3, 4. Because this is a contrast thread, it's not part of the weave or anything like that, I'm just going to leave a tail hanging out. And again, when you have a floating selvage, one side you're going to go over the floating selvage, the other side you're going to come out under the floating selvage, okay? Alright, so I'm going to go over the floating selvage here, I'm going to go right across, under on this side, I'm just going to leave a little bit of a tail. And just for the beginning part, sometimes I do like 2 or 3 lines at the same time so that when they squish together, it makes it as straight as possible quickly, okay? But that's not necessarily always the case. So again, on this side now I'm going, okay? So, yeah, I'm going, and so basically I'm going to go over this side and under the floating selvage on this side, okay? And then I'm just going to beat it right now, okay? So I'm going down here. Now, if you notice when you're going that it's still kind of wonky, then you've got to ask yourself, is it tensioned properly? Like, do you have enough tension when you've pulled, I don't even know what that part is called, but when you're pulling forward, okay, on the warp there, you're advancing the warp, is it tensioned enough? Because if it's too loose, it will get kind of wonky, okay? So let me do here 3, all right? So over, under here. All right, okay, I always beat twice. Everybody has their own way of doing things. Over and under, okay. Now if I start looking, okay, it looks like all my threads are now going straight, which is excellent. That's what I want. So I really don't necessarily need to go any further. I could continue going a little bit further, but again, you know, I only have a certain amount of warp. I didn't give myself a whole lot of wastage, so I don't necessarily want to do that, okay? So at this point here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the scissors off my squeaky, oh, I don't know what, anyways, alright, and then I want to actually start with the actual, honest to God, the color. So my first color, basically, the hem is going to be black, because when I actually get into the body of it, it's going to end up being, it's going to start off with black as well. So I could potentially start off with a beige, it's up to me to do that, but I did actually end up winding, okay? I ended up winding the black. So I'm going to take out, all right, the bobbin of this one here. You'll notice I tend to be right-handed, so right now because I'm videotaping all the equipment's on my left-hand side right now, but I tend to have like some sort of tray table here with my pattern, with all the things that I might necessarily need if I want to check things off as I go along on the pattern that I've got. Okay, so again, I'm putting it in, okay, the way I like to do it, and as I said, as I put it through, sometimes it unwinds more and it gets tangled up. I find that when I put it in, if the yarn is coming underneath and then coming through this hole here on this side, for whatever reason, I tend to have less issues. I mean, it could be just purely coincidence, but that's what I found anyways. Okay, so I'm going to put that in. Now I'm going to basically start, okay? Now, if you were going to do a hem stitch, for example, you would want to leave 4 lengths worth, you know, before you get started, so that you can go back and end up doing the hem stitching. I'm going to be doing a sewn hem where basically it's folded over. I don't necessarily need to do that, because once this comes off the loom, I'll do a zigzag stitch across to basically secure. You could also do fray check, for example, before you take it off the loom to, you know, to secure your ends there as well. Okay. So basically it says on my pattern that I need to do 1, 2, 3, 4, and I got to do this 3 times, okay? So I'm going to start, all right, oop, try that again. All right, so 1, 2, 3, 4, all right, 2, so again, over, under, for the floating selvage. And that's for when you have a twill. You'll notice that that is done, because otherwise you'll have loose threads on the side. It doesn't look good. If it's a plain weave, it's not going to ask you for a floating selvage. Okay. And then you've got 3, and then you've got 4. Okay. Now, the question people will ask is, well, how on earth does do you end up getting nice straight edges on the side? Because if you pull too hard, the thread going across, that becomes a problem and it will pull in. If it's too loose, you've got loops on the end, again, it's not really sightly. So what I end up doing, now I've just done one, so let me do my first check mark here, okay, is that when I start, and again, if you ever forget where you are, and I hate that because somebody will come downstairs, I'll start talking and I have no idea where I finished. So if, for example, the last one I should have finished was 4. So if I lift this up, okay, and if the thread comes out, comes away nice and loosely, that is the correct one. So for example, let's beat this back down. Let's say I was thinking this is 3 and I'm trying to pull it away and it's not, like it's really stuck and I can see that it's not coming away nicely the way it would. I know that I've got the wrong treble. So it was number 4, I finished number 4, okay? So now let's go and do one more, okay? All right. So here basically what I usually do is I hold it at the end here and I will make the yarn go in a diagonal, okay, across. And so what happens is that when I actually beat it, it will, it's not overly tight, okay? So I'm not pulling it in and it will actually push itself the way it needs to across. And so when I look at it going downwards here, okay, I notice that, okay, this one here is a little loopy. So again, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to lift this back up, okay, just going to pull it out, okay. And you don't want it, as I said, overly tight, looking like it's being pulled in. You just want it to be exactly at that point. And so I usually feel to check, is it there, okay. So again, all right, now let's go on to number 2. We're going to do the same thing, okay. So I'm going to check on this end here, all right. And again, take a look at the end and see, does it look like it's even or pulling in, okay? Now we're at number 3. Okay. And number 4. And again, always doing my over-under, all right? The first time I did floating selvage, obviously I couldn't talk, I had to pay very close attention to that, otherwise I was going to end up making mistakes, and then you would see that you have loops on the side because the threads are not being caught properly, okay? And so I'm just going to continue on with my pattern. So I've got my second check mark. I need to do obviously one more check mark for this, and then there's another portion of the hem that needs to be done before I actually go on to the actual body of the actual blanket, okay? Well, I hope that helps.